This is Chapter 2 of Cromwell Croquet, Book 1 of the Mysteries of Brambletown series. If you missed the earlier chapters, the links are in the description. Archibald took his leave of Miss Cromwell with an air of apparent dignity, his ego tangled up beneath the mask of good manners. The audacity of it! To take advantage of him like that, to swindle him for 200 crown marks without batting an eyelid, looking him straight in the eye while he towered a head above her. Such nerve as he had never seen in such a situation. A mere shopkeeper extorting a lord, and with a smile, no less. Archibald could not decide whether he was outraged or impressed. For the moment, he strode along at a determined pace, eager to be done with Broome Street. This wretched shopping street went on forever, he thought, and now he had to walk home. He, who owned the finest collection of brooms in Brambletown, now had to resign himself to hurrying along on foot, taking every precaution not to run into Lady Talloway, who would have treated him to a scandal in the middle of the street. He simply hoped that, following his disappearance, his intended's chaperone had escorted her back to her carriage. His coachman had dropped the three of them off a few hours earlier, as Madame had been in desperate need of trawling the shops. After an eternity trailing after her like a well-behaved little pet dragon, at the end of his tether, he had waited for her to enter yet another shop, still without ever buying anything, nothing ever being good enough for her. And, the moment she had gone through the door, instead of following, he had slipped away. Naturally, he had pressed half a crown mark into the chaperone's hand to ensure her silence before making a clean getaway. How was he going to explain himself? He had no idea. Not to Lady Talloway, nor to his own mother, who had saddled him with this insufferable prospective bride. But that was a problem for later. For now, he had to reach Thornbury Street, where he lived, like all of Brambletown's good society. And he had to get there without a broom, he reminded himself sourly. He knew perfectly well that he ought to have taken one before embarking on this fiasco. Yes, but there it was. Brooms, for people like him, were frowned upon, crude, common, vulgar. These people understood nothing, he thought. Only ornamental brooms truly interested good society, but never, oh never, to be ridden. Nor to be carried on one's back either, as one normally transported a broom. Ornamental brooms were specially trained to do two things. First, to fly vertically just above the ground, and second, to follow their master like a shadow. That was all. Which was to say they had very little in common anymore with flying brooms, the real ones. They looked more like trophies than anything else, adorned with precious stones, carved to excess, to the point of becoming utterly unusable, so riddled and pared down that they could no longer bear the weight of a man. In any case, good society had long since forgotten how to fly. No one wanted to use a means of transport deemed degrading, as it was so widely used by the lower classes. No one, that is, except Archibald. He walked what felt like an eternity before reaching 103 Thornbury Street. It was a building of respectable age, particularly large, with ochre stone walls pierced by elegant vertical windows and topped with great chimneys beneath greyish, pointed roofs. It was adorned with a discreetly flowered garden, its shrubs elegantly clipped, all surrounded by a low wall of cut stone and a wrought metal gate of jet black. Such was the architecture of every residence on Thornbury Street. Deviate from this strict description, and you would very quickly be marked out as the eccentric to be avoided, especially if you had the misfortune of being a mere bourgeois. Archibald passed through the little garden gate, which barely creaked on its hinges. 4 strides were enough to carry him to the majestic wooden door that separated him from deliverance.
Archibald, here you are.
Or not.
Archibald Valmont, what have you done now? That poor little Talloway.
Lady Valmont, dressed as ever in evening wear, whether it was Sunday morning or Monday night, burst into the hall the very second Archibald closed the door.
Little Talloway has come to complain that you cruelly abandoned her in the middle of a stroll when you were supposedly having such a wonderful time.
Archibald maintained an even demeanour. He removed his outdoor cloak, while a perfectly well-mannered coat stand limped towards him, the clock of its 3 wooden legs echoing on the stone before being muffled by the heavy rug. Archibald tossed his garment among the outstretched branches of the well-intentioned, animated piece of furniture.
Whatever could have gone through your head, my child?
Oh, you know.
Archie, darling, you can no longer afford this kind of fancy. That little Talloway is absolutely charming, and incidentally, she comes from a very old, very respectable family. She even has a mage among her ancestors, did you know? And you need a wife. It is quite simply perfect. You know that perfectly well.
For whom?
Archibald asked, heading into the winter garden, his mother at his heels.
Don't play the fool, Archibald. You can no longer dodge the issue. You must marry and perpetuate the Valmont name.
A wooden service trolley mounted on 4 small wheels slid into the room of its own accord and offered its masters a silver tray bearing tea and small biscuits. Archibald took it and set everything down on the low table framed by armchairs and sofas. The little varnished wooden trolley trembled with pleasure at feeling the gentle warmth through the tray resting on its back.
And have charming offspring, thanks to whom you will finally see the name Pickwick, which precedes Valmont on my papers, disappear for good.
He retorted as he dropped into a sofa.
Little Talloway Valmont grandchildren, or others for that matter, so long as it is a noble name attached to yours. Isn't that what you so dearly hope for, Mother?
Lady Valmont's face twisted into a grimace.
You know perfectly well that it isn't,
She snapped, folding her arms.
You know perfectly well that it is.
He cut in, enchanting the tea service with his wand, which magically served him a steaming cup. Lady Valmont blushed to the tips of her ears. The Valmont family had inherited its title of nobility many generations ago, so many that one struggled to keep count. And it had been passed down from generation to generation to the eldest child, girl or boy, without distinction. Lady Valmont herself, the eldest of her siblings, had therefore proudly inherited the title and reminded anyone who cared to listen, or not, whenever the opportunity arose, or not. What she proclaimed far less loudly, however, was that the Valmonts, respectable though they might be, had also been penniless for a very long time, without anyone being able to remember quite how that had come about. Perhaps their ancestors had made little effort to pass on the story of this unfortunate shipwreck to the next generation. Be that as it may, Lady Valmont, a woman of great practical sense, had eventually resolved to marry, against her parents' wishes, needless to say, a merchant by the unassuming name of Pickwick, who had made his fortune in modern lavatories. A particularly flourishing business, but one far from noble for the Valmont family. Fortunately, her title had allowed her to keep her maiden name rather than automatically taking that of her husband. Her own generation thus saved appearances. But what of the next? So, at the birth of her only son, Lady Valmont had finally found a way to sweep under the rug the paternal surname inherited by the offspring of this union, as profitable as it was shameful. On the registers, the child had therefore officially been named Archibald P. Valmont, thus camouflaging a barely bourgeois name that Lady Valmont abhorred. A half-success that the heiress to the title now dreamed of completing entirely with the marriage of her only son to a wife of his rank, namely a lady, and nothing less.
Will you at least go and apologize to the poor girl? You know her mother and I are very good friends. What will I look like at the next meeting of the Thornbury Ladies' Club? They will all know what happened within days. If your relations with little Talloway have not improved by then,
Yes, you. Go on.
Lady Valmont huffed in irritation.
I shall have to plead ill health.
But no one will believe it.
Exactly.
Archibald delicately set his now empty teacup down on the small table, which struggled to remain still. It had always been a playful little piece of furniture, and Archibald suspected it of sometimes racing about the small winter sitting room at full tilt when no one was there to see it. He had found the rug rumpled at the corners on several occasions.
I can only hope this finally cures you of arranging unsolicited meetings for me with all your friends' marriageable daughters. No, forgive me, not all of them. Only the daughters of noble ladies. Tell me, are the bourgeois women of the Thornbury Ladies' Club not offended by these machinations? I wager they have noticed your little game.
Archibald!
Mother, I've had my fill, and I have decided to stop behaving like the perfect gentleman with all those girls you impose upon me.
Lady Valmont cursed, before storming out of the room, fists clenched. Archibald allowed himself a small smile of victory.
At last, free, my dear Archie.
He thought aloud.
It took you long enough to finally find the courage to stop giving in to her every whim. A mother, yes. A matchmaker, never again.
The next day, Archibald opened his eyes long before sunrise. After 2 hours of insomnia, unable to stand it any longer, he leapt out of bed. That night, he had dreamed, and dreamed again, of Miss Cromwell. Yesterday's astonishment had vanished in the night. All that remained in the early morning was that strange sensation of having met someone utterly out of the ordinary, someone who did not trouble herself overmuch with social conventions. That, for Archibald, was new, and everything new was incredibly exciting. Instead of the usual stiff daughters of ladies, hypocritical beaux, and soporific conversations about the weather, he had been extorted for 200 crown marks without being able to find a single thing to object to. That, really, did not happen every day. After sinking into a steaming bath and donning his clothes for the day, Archibald crossed his bedroom and took his seat at his desk. He glanced at his wand, which had spent the night in its case, then, with the tip of his finger, tickled a sleeping quill in an empty inkwell.
Good morning, Plumet.
The elegant white quill quivered and stretched its silky barbs before curving the tip of its shaft. It then began to spin on itself at great speed, propelling it into the air. Adroitly, it adjusted its trajectory to come and settle delicately in the palm of its master.
I'm glad to see you too. I need to write a note to a certain Miss Cromwell.
The quill needed no further prompting. It took off again like an airborne top and landed in a brimming inkwell. Archibald took hold of Plumet and a sheet of writing paper and began to write.
Dear Miss Cromwell, as agreed, I am sending you 200 crown marks, hard and honest, for your door. As for your silence, it will not be entirely necessary. Mother has already heard of my sudden disappearance, Lady Talloway having made no effort to hide her displeasure. That said, you are the only one who knows how we managed, together, this brilliant sleight of hand. I would therefore be grateful if you would keep your word, as I have kept mine. Postscript. You may keep the purse, unless you would prefer to make it an honest excuse for us to meet again. Lord Archibald P. Valmont.
Archibald folded the writing paper and sealed it with a puddle of molten wax. The purse filled with coins had already been waiting on the desk since the day before. Should he send a courier at once, when dawn was barely breaking through the window? What had he planned for today anyway? Ah, yes, absolutely. Nothing. Unless... A small mischievous smile appeared on his face. Archibald sprang to his feet, grabbed his wand, and slipped it into the narrow, tailor-made pocket inside his waistcoat, pocketed the purse along with his handwritten note, and burst into his personal library adjoining his bedroom. A library in which nothing remained but the furniture lining the walls. The shelves had been emptied of their books before being quite simply set alight. In place of horizontally stacked volumes, there now stood an impressive collection of flying brooms hung vertically in the refitted bookcases. At the centre of the room, an imposing workshop bench sported a multitude of drawers in which were neatly stored all manner of stirrups, saddles, handlebars, rudders, small articulated leather wings, hanging lanterns, baskets, and other pouches of various shapes and sizes.
My friends,
Archibald greeted them out of habit.
let's see now. Which of you should I fly today?
At these words, a certain agitation seized the brooms. Some quivered at the bristles, while others knocked their handles against the backs of the bookcases. Archibald opened one of the windows and leaned his head outside. Then, returning indoors, he walked around the room, eyes fixed on his collection of mounts, muttering to himself,
Slightly cool temperature, little humidity, but the wind is picking up. I need, let's see, a broom both heavy and maneuverable, which will save me having to add a rudder.
In the end, he freed a broom with a thick handle made of reddish wood, brilliantly varnished. It bore an elegant bouquet of smooth, fine, supple twigs of dark brown, married to the handle by a triple bronze band. At the end of the handle, an elegant engraved bronze plate was riveted to the wood, on which one could read, Windveer, First Edition, 1789, Property of Lord Archibald P. Valmont. Archibald grabbed it firmly and unhooked it from the bookcase. Understanding itself to be the chosen one, the Windveer immediately slipped free of its master's grip and levitated of its own accord towards the enormous wooden island, where it settled gently at full length, ready for flight preparation. Archibald stifled a knowing laugh. His brooms had truly received a faultless education. He had personally seen to it. He grabbed a flat saddle of medium size, ideal for short, comfortable journeys when there was no need to save space for cupboard storage, as well as bronze stirrups to match the broom's banding. He locked the two elements into place with a heavy press on the click-and-fly mechanism welded to the metal ring, and tapped the handle 3 times to indicate to the broom that they were ready to take off. The Windveer needed no further encouragement. It shot upwards with vigour and took up a hovering position in the frame of the open window. Archibald followed it, climbed the 2 steps of the stepladder set against the wall, facing the void, mounted his Windveer, settled his feet in the stirrups, and launched himself from the first floor.